Well, I guess it's my turn to respond, and I have to say, he might have been a bit brave, Mr. Anderson, Joe. It's taken me 40 years to be able to do that, you know, and it was always Sir or Mr. Now he's still telling me off. He said, please call me Joe.
There's other terms used too.
But look, I have to tell you how this project started, and it has a gestation period of probably about 70 odd years or thereabouts. When my parents first arrived at Awarua, I see Gilbert Dudley down there. Hi Gil, thank you for being here. His dad was here just before my father. My parents come up from the Chatham Islands, where my father had spent the war, 5 years in World War II. And they arrived at Awarua, and we lived in the first cottage on the left here, going out for the next 15 years. And my father ultimately became the manager of the station upon his retirement. Well, that's basically where it all started, really. It wasn't until I was getting on a bit, and I've travelled the world a couple of times, been on a few trips here and there, and Awarua has never ever got out of my system. In one form or another, it's always been there. And I can well remember back in 1971 when I was at the Traffic College at Trentham, and I had to deliver a lecture. It was part of our ongoing training. So I did one on Awarua radio. Well, no one up there had ever heard of Awarua radio. They didn't know the place had been built by the Germans. And not too long ago, I ran into one of my colleagues, former colleagues, who was on that course, and he said, I always remember that training course we were on. He said, it wasn't you that I remembered, it was the lecture you delivered on Awarua radio. So no, it's never been far from my mind, and 12 months ago, my family sent me over to Scotland. I went home, went back to my ancestral territory, and I was with good friends over there. At 8 o'clock in the morning in the Glen, calm, still morning, the pipe started up, and there was huge emotion ran through me. You know, this is the same territory that my forebears had been running around on before they ever came out to New Zealand in the 1850s and 60s. And again, I had thought of home, my parents, my wife and family, and Awarua radio too. But I have been involved in family history, and that was sort of coming to a stop. I'd squeezed the sponge about as dry as I could. And just prior to going over to Scotland this time last year, I had this vision of writing biographies of all the 19 managers and superintendents and officers in charge. And I'd done some preliminary work before I went away, and then come home from that trip and I started on it. And I became quite captivated by what I found. There was stuff in it that my facts and figures and information my parents had never told me about Awarua. I found, for example, in the First World War, well, the place was actually built by the Germans, a telephone company, and they had all Scarborough out in New Zealand with the impending hostilities of World War I. So they took off, they got out, and while I don't know for certain, the nearest friendly territory, German territory at the time, was German Samoa. The Germans had other possessions up through the Pacific. But anyway, they went up there, and the war started, and there was 3 people from Awarua. There was a superintendent and 2 operators that were seconded to the New Zealand Expeditionary Force to go up to Apia to repair the radio station. It was identical to the one that was built here, and one in Awanui, and up near Kaitaia, one in Pennant Hills in Sydney, and one over in Fremantle. Well, they went up there to fix this place, and they later sent parts over from Awarua and Kaitaia up to Apia to put that radio station back in business. And then I stumbled on another fact of World War I, where a manager of Awarua, and he was the first and only manager ever to die on active service, he was seconded to the New Zealand Expeditionary Force, and he went over to a place called Mesopotamia. We might better know it as Iraq today. And he left New Zealand as a relatively newly married man. I discovered just a few months ago that his wife was pregnant, and he gets over there and within weeks he is dead. He died of, I think it was typhoid or jaundice or something like that. And you can actually find his grave on the Commonwealth War Graves site. He's buried in Basra in Iraq. Well, that started to irritate me because one of the Awarua staff who ended up there, and later a superintendent of Awarua, was a fellow called the name of James Henry Hampton. Well, I set about trying to find some records or information of him, and he came from a little place called Southbridge, Dan Carter territory up near Ashburton. So I went to the Ashburton archives, and they said, New Zealand Wireless Horse Troop, pardon? Never heard of it. It was such a short period of history of the New Zealand Army. They were only in business when the British Imperial Forces came to New Zealand and said, look, we haven't got enough radio men. So they put this detachment of radio operators, and they were skilled operators, sent them to war with horses. And the whole thing eventually just captivated me. Well, I got to the end of the 19 managers, and I had a problem. I had about 40 odd pages of written information, and I discovered hordes and hordes and hordes of information. I remember Noel Bonish here, hi Noel, thank you, hounding him about his dad, because our two fathers worked together on the Chatham Islands towards the end of the war, and also at Awarua here in the 40s and 50s. And then there was other people up and down the country. Brian and Bibby Webb. Brian Webb lives in Upper Hutt. He was here in the 50s and 60s. There was Don Nicol in Palmerston North. They all heard from me, a lot of them, many times over. And eventually I had the makings of a book, and I didn't know what to do with it. And I have such an affection for the place that I simply turned the records over. It seemed the honourable thing to do. And poor Paul Mackay, I can't see Paul at the moment. Right, well, I remember I must have agitated or irritated him to hell too, trying to squeeze information out of the museum. I knew they had records. But when I go back and look now, reflect on the people who made this possible, I have to say, first and foremost, it's the Southern Museum and Archives. There is a substantial part of the Awarua history there. And this is before you even go out of Invercargill to Archives New Zealand and Dunedin or Wellington. And David Dudfield and his staff, I ran them riot multiple times. They'll just occupy an office and there'll be box after box after box of files and photographs. That wasn't the start of it. We got Linda Teal down the back here from the Invercargill Public Library. And look, I'm not sure how many times I went in there reading newspapers and microfilm. But then I found an ingenious way of searching the New Zealand Gazette. So any person who worked for the government service, including Awarua staff, you put their name into a search engine, and it gives you pages after pages of information and tells you where to go in the New Zealand Gazettes. And Linda and her staff wheeled these Gazette books out by the dozen for many days and many weeks. And one, I was actually in there just recently and doing a little bit more work, and one of Linda's staff said, we have some people have one or two Gazettes out, but I've never ever had to wheel trolley loads. But everyone's played a part, truly they have, and I haven't been able to do it on my own. It's been a labour of love. I have a great affinity with with Awarua, and I guess if I needed any inspiration at all, it was my parents. And so sad they can't be here. I'm sure as hell the old man would be up there looking down. He said, at least, you know, I can sort of see him, well, at least you've done something with your time. But it was an easy decision to make, to turn the copyright of the book and all the records and everything I discovered over to the museum. It just seemed the right thing to do. But I got the first manuscripts together, and I got them into the printer, and Sycamore Print, Norman's down the back here, and I think Sue's around here somewhere. Is she running for cover now? Sue was his graphic artist at the Print and Wax, and they suggested a number of changes and alterations, and they have gone out of their way to, you know, make this a presentable product. I was turning it out on the home computer, and they've got a commercial print, and you can see the result of it today. So I thank Norman and his staff. It's been much appreciated. But there's that many people up and down the country who have been involved in it. We've got Neil Sanderson from Auckland, maritimeradio.org. We've got Rex Johnson up here. I first met Rex when he learnt I was doing this thing, and I got a message from him. I think someone from, might have been Paul or Paul Mackay, said, look, if you're finding any stuff about Awarua, send it up to Rex. He's the webmaster for the Awarua Museum. And so Rex started getting hounded. He might still be getting hounded these days. But then Venture Southland came on board through Renata Hardy, and she's here today. So everyone's made a pretty fine contribution to it, and I thank you all from the bottom of my heart. But is Neil about anywhere? I don't tend to hang around here much longer. I have to tell you that it was just a follow on from my family history that really has created this book, and I never realised the magnitude might be the wrong word, but it was one day when I went into the library and I had the Alison Beckham from the Weekend Express newspaper print an article. I was seeking for information on the Awarua Battalion of the Home Guard, and a couple of days later, after that had been published, I was in the public library, and I ran across one of Linda's staff come up to me. She started talking about this book I was publishing. I said, what book? What publishing? But I started to realise then that this thing was becoming, well, I described it then as a little monster. And so it's turned out to be. But I have to tell you, that there's one person, that my family are here today. James has come home from Christchurch. Andrew has come from Dunedin, and his girlfriend just arrived in from Holland, flew in from Holland on Thursday and made a special trip down here. And without support of Evelyn, and there is a number of times I'll be straight up, she could have showed me the front door, fair go, she could have. She did spell checks for me, helped me with spelling, typing, all sorts of things. So when I got involved in the family history, we came back on a trip to Australia, and I was on the plane on the way back. I said, I'm going to put a family reunion together and get all the Glennies down to Invercargill. She said, and she didn't approve of something. You see, and the nose would go up, and there was a bit of a grunt. Well, we did that anyway. I took no notice of it. When it became aware that I was doing this Awarua radio thing and turning out a book, she hasn't said a word. But by hell, she was there all the way. And Evelyn, would you like to come up here, please? I've got something for it. Yes.